welcome everyone, and thank you so very much for joining us on the Talking Cloud podcast. I'm here, Grant Asplin, with my dubious and always informed co-host, Patrick Pusher. How are you, Patrick?
I am wonderful. How are you doing, buddy?
Man, if I'm above ground and breathing, everything else is a bonus, brother. So things are terrific. Could be better, could be worse, but we're here. So I'm looking forward to today and our episode and being with you. What's going on with you?
Well, lots going on with me. As I think we probably referred to in a few episodes now, I've made a big move. So I'm one time zone over, kind of into central Canada, way out in the bush, powered by Elon Musk Starlink. So, the fact that we're doing this is actually kind of nuts, given where I am.
Okay, and now we have someone to blame if there's any eruptions or problems,
That's
right? Okay,
That's right.
Good.
That's right.
That's
Tech
awesome,
support.
man. How do you like it?
It's amazing. I'm in the process of building a studio here, so hopefully it kind of has the look and feel of what we've done in the past, but it's great. Can't wait to be here.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. Well, I know that was something you were working up to for several months, getting prepared. It was, it was like 1,000 miles or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
It was
1,000
long.
miles straight east.
I should be speaking kilometers since we are an international program, and
Exactly.
I come to you in America, but my co-host comes to you from wonderful friends of the North, Canada. So
That's right.
That's cool,
Beautiful
man.
now, but very soon to be cold north. Yes.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Well, you're going to really be wishing for that image that's behind you when we get into those months. But hey,
Indeed.
we got some cool news to get to. I want to definitely jump on that before we get to our guest. Okay, so let me jump over to the newsroom and start right off with saying, here we go again, man. This is another Move It breach, or I should say related, right? And I think this, my real point on this is just when the guys find a way to get into our motion that we take for granted, man, it can do some serious damage. And this is seemingly just continuing to roll, right? Long tail, as people discover and find out, they got it, right? I mean, it's pretty,
that's right.
It's pretty crazy.
It's not all that nuts. I mean, it's a vulnerability in a third-party application that many people have used. Some have embedded in their own applications. It's a file transfer application, right? But it itself now is vulnerable, which means anything that embeds it or any process that uses it is vulnerable. And it's a scary thing. I have some application security customers, and they tell me this is the most asked for feature or request is, much like Log4j was for maybe CSPMs, right? On this side, it's more kind of the application side. Where am I vulnerable? Where do I use this?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, come on. I think about, if you ever bought a house, if you've ever refinanced, you've ever done any activity that requires moving, files that are still too large to attach, right? And oftentimes, it's a more secure means of workflow and control. But, you can do all your digital signing, but obviously those organizations are embedding in like tools, right, to move files around.
That's right.
So, but, I certainly wasn't intending to pick on TD Ameritrade or Schwab.
No.
In fact, I had a list of probably 10 different breaches that have occurred just in the last week or two that I could have included. So it's the pervasiveness that's, I think, somewhat, it's a little concerning. And another example, okay? Now we're on to Docker and, the fact that we have to look differently about how we're using these resources, where we're putting secrets and keys and where we're stashing stuff, because the percentage is alarming that was discovered in this particular article, where they went in and it's just all the inadvertent exposure that occurs in a Docker. And again, look, you want to take the time, you could, I'm sure, go through and detail the nuances. My point about this is more, as we get into these comfortable motions of using things that we're not really understanding the controls, the security that's in place, the consequences. You might have the greatest hygiene on the planet, but if they don't, how severe will that be, right? I mean, there's it's pervasive.
Yeah, and there's hygiene, and then there's also there's a modern way of handling sensitive credentials, right? When your applications need credentials, what we used to do is embed them in configuration files. And this is where these secrets are leaking from, right? Just
right.
Even not necessarily, but often plain text files where they exist. If you're at least a infrastructure as a service user, there's a modern way to do that. You can launch your instance, you can configure those secrets at AWS. It's part of the identity service that kind of runs EC2. It can pass them temporarily through that service to your workload. You can grab them and then use them, and they never have to exist, theoretically, on disk at all, right? For those bad guys to find in very rudimentary and kind of easy ways, frankly. So, if you know how to architect your application in a modern way, you know how to deal with these things. But still, so many of us, to your point, we adopt the cloud. We think we kind of know it runs and feels kinds of like our hypervisor did in the in the data center. So we just run with it, and we don't we don't necessarily take the time.
Yeah, I mean,
they do. That's absolutely a correct statement. That's the problem.
Exactly. Yeah. I just had this conversation. We'll talk more about that conversation later. But I mean, there are so many subtle nuances. I mean, the analogy that I'll throw out there and we'll come back to is golf and baseball, right? They both swinging and hitting the ball, but there's some significant differences that if you try to do one like the other, you're going to be in big trouble. It's just, it's really interesting.
Great analogy.
So here, Schwab and the Move It exploit and its vulnerability, Docker and them. But here's what should be more concerning to everyone is it's so widespread. This was just announced. Here you've got a remote code execution 0-day, and it's found in Windows. And this is a problem. This is
a problem at scale.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the scary part.
And these are serious flaws that are being discovered or exploited, or vulnerabilities, or call whatever you want to do it. But if you think the others are widespread, and I have to show this one too, Patrick, not because I'm trying to throw shame on any one vendor, but I do want to emphasize how critical it is to really investigate where you put your bets, where you place your investment, who you partner with.
That's a good way to say it. That's right.
And
or you spend your dollars.
And listen, man, when you look at the number of CVEs that have been released on Fortinet, just this year, I think it's like over 100 or something. I mean, what's the cost? Sure, they had the lowest price. They were the low bid provider. But what's the cost to you now? I read this recent one today. I think what it said was the remedy was stop using SSL 2.0. I mean, I don't. Yeah. I mean,
what does that mean?
That's probably not a good option.
Stop your business. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so, I know we don't mean to pick on a single vendor, but at the same time, even on pretty I don't know if PC is the right word, but pretty friendly platforms like LinkedIn. Fortinet's starting to get kind of bashed a bit, and I hear them say, we're the only vendor that finds a lot of CVEs internal testing before we release. We do a really rigorous job internally, and I'm sure that's true. But I mean, it's not just the number of vulnerabilities. They do things like build backdoors into their services, and aren't necessarily really truthful about that up front. At least that's allegedly. But so that's it's kind of a scary combination, right? And I think that's why we speak about them kind of in particular. But you're right. This is a discussion about kind of every at least software vendor, if not software hardware vendor.
And you know what I think it speaks to, Patrick, is I think we've really, kind of like a teeter-totter of kind of making a shift. Because heretofore, the way we got there is best of breed, best of breed, best of breed. Every time there was a new use case. Well, the problem with that is it paints you into a patchwork that you need to make work together. And, that could be really challenging. And we often base the criteria off the selection on features, i.e., capabilities within, right? You got to give me, what can you do?
That's right.
And price, right? And very rarely do I see how many CVEs have been released on your product / portfolio in the last 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year.
Right.
And
how many have been addressed?
How long did it take you to fix them? And how many still remain? It seems to me if, I'm somebody that considers whatever data I have to be my crown jewels. I don't know. Maybe I'm daft, but that seems
those seem to be pretty basic questions I would want to know the answers to, right?
Just
they really do.
Just really critical to ask. So I don't know. Anyway, moving on. This I thought was amazing. AI's the rage. Well, now, everybody's been talking about how ChatGPT has put in guardrails and controls, but I think that, if you think like a bad guy, it didn't take you long to see this coming, right? No guardrails. In fact, quite the opposite. Designed and built to help you deliver malicious code, to deliver malware, to do bad things. Now, I saw some discussion from a colleague of mine that says, quote, he's not convinced. And I think it was in reference to the implication that this would be able to actually write better phishing than a human heretofore.
But maybe that's not even the goal. Is that even the right question to ask?
It's scale. It's scale.
It's scale.
It's repetition.
Yeah.
It's the ability to sample in every facet imaginable instead of.
That's
gosh,
right. I imagine today. I imagine today you think of like between 1 and 3 really great, catchy ways to grab someone's attention, and you send those out. I mean, with AI, you could literally send 1,000 different ways or methods to 1,000 people, measure the responses coming back, tune over time, all with zero effort, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot you can do as a bad guy with AI for sure.
Yeah.
And I read the story, and it's a combination of them training it on, dark web data and obviously different data sources than the mainstream LLMs, and prompt engineering to get around the common engine's limitations, much like ChatGPT. So it's interesting. I mean, of course, we saw this coming, but there, similar things exist for ChatGPT where they'll coach you how to build a prompt that will get it to do more than it's supposed to do. Over time, of course, they're making that harder and harder to do, but still there.
And the fact is, sorry, I live not too far from the tracks. I'm kind of a hobo, so. But we see our research, at Checkpoint has seen a tremendous, they themselves have actually conducted a tremendous amount of research where they actually are forcing, if you will, the ChatGPT to allow it, right? With the way it just kind of talks back and how you respond in the voice,
right.
and your assertiveness, and you kind of press your point.
And hey, this is just for educational purposes.
Right.
Literally try to convince it. Yeah.
And successfully are able to.
Yes.
Okay. Which is of course the concerning part. And I have not read this. I was going to bring this up. I'll just throw it out here. This is an article that I saw on Less Wrong, which is a really interesting forum. But this was just a whole summary about how this person went in and tried to go in and just get around the guardrails. Haven't got there, but looks pretty interesting. And for those of you that do want a great resource, and we'll put the links to these stories, including this. Information is Beautiful is just a terrific site. They have this, which will be updated on a regular basis. Here you see it was on the 12th. So I definitely encourage you to go there, because here you can see all of the different AIs,
it's a great
the bots.
resource.
House, as well as parameter size, which is an important aspect when you think about these large language models, as well as
how well is it trained?
And how long they've been around. So, great resource, and I thought I'd throw that up. So, gosh, Patrick, sorry, man. I feel like I've just been talking on, and I know I want to hear from you. So it's over to you, buddy.
All good. Yeah, listen, this one hits really close to home, right? I spent some time at Orca, some early time. I was there first hire in marketing. Thank you, Elias, for that leap of faith. And spent about a year and a half there. Did really wonderful things. Orca was a fantastic company. But yeah, when Wiz came along with really similar technology, Orca was in the process of patenting their technology. And you and I happen to know a little bit about patents, right? We've both had that sort of education in the past. And they ever since I had joined, they had a patent pending against their technology. And so it did make me wonder, I didn't understand the link between Orca and Wiz founders. I've read some articles and not sure where the truth really lies, and we don't have to talk about that, right? But always wondered about the similarity of the tech, for sure.
So they work together.
I don't know how the relationship was. This article suggests, not this one, maybe another one I read, suggests that Orca showed the Wiz founders, when they were still at Microsoft, the tech.
Okay. Now it's.
I don't know if they made that inference or if they said that directly, right? But that was definitely the idea. And so I think that's their alleged link, right? Is, hey, we showed you this, went and developed it, and then you copied it.
Well, yeah, but an idea isn't anything. It's all about action.
It is. It is.
So whoever acted first, if they're the same and one came in before the next, I would give it to the first one.
Right. Yeah, if they've done the work and patented the idea and did that properly and timely, and if you don't, then you get what you get. But if you did, then I agree that's supposed to be a protection, right? So it'll be interesting.
That should be the criteria. And if Wiz built a product after Orca, submitted their patent after Orca, then it's a no-brainer. But if for some reason it happened the other way around,
right?
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think it'll come down to interpretation of the patent, kind of the breadth, as it often does, and timing. Right. That's something we don't know. Even I don't know as an employee the exact sort of the dates and the times and when these things happen. So it'll be interesting to see. It really will be, for sure.
No kidding.
The other next story that I thought was really interesting was that the NSA/CISA have come out with their guidelines for CI/CD pipeline security. The shift left, mantra that we've been talking about for so long. The shift left mantra that CSPMs and a brand new category of upcoming category of tool and ASPM really focus on. But, that focus has grown so much that we have the kind of these bodies, which are typically a little bit slower against new technologies, right? To not only adopt, but to release guidelines to release this, which is really nice. It's quite cloud focused. It's not, it doesn't make that assumption, but there's a lot of sort of cloud terminology in it. And one thing I thought you'd really love in the active hardening section, minimize the use of long-term credentials. Good, good segue into how much you and I talk about identity these days, but they're right there. Of course, make sure things are encrypted, make sure you're using certificates and confirming identities, but right in the middle, only build as many credentials as you need, and make sure they're not too powerful, and minimize the use of ones that last a long time.
That whole space right there, I look at it, we all understand the over provisioning of capabilities or permissions and all that. But I think what's the worst of all is it's space junk. You leave it floating out there, and it's worse than space junk. It's space bombs, because if they get discovered, they can really blow up on you. Sure. I mean, they're just these.
But they're buried in the 6th page of your 10th account, and I mean, how do you even know they're there? Right? Like in a lot of cases, we're talking about an enterprise use case. You've got tons of cloud accounts, whether they're organized under an organization or not, and they all get used by different business units, different levels of maturity. It's really hard. The visibility is tough.
I saw a number the other day that in the enterprise, in the cloud native world, less than 5% of identities are human. So that just tells you right there, and it's logical, right? Because
it is.
Because nothing is right here. I have to create a privilege to get to everything.
Everything. Yeah. That's how fine-grained we've demanded it to be, and so that's the way it is. Everything has an identity. You attach some sort of permission to that identity. Often it's in groups, but it can be very specific as well. Yeah, it's for those that thought the cloud was going to be easier, it just isn't. It just isn't.
Yeah, and all it is it's reminds me of, it's like an electric car versus a 4-cylinder 180 horse car. You can just go. You can kill yourself faster.
Yeah,
that's right. You can. You can stomp on the pedal, and hit the tree in 2.8 seconds.
That's right. Way faster.
Way faster. So it's
so true.
It's interesting.
This was a good segue into our last story, and that was really this new CSA article. About 2 weeks ago, not even a couple of days ago, around, again, implementing least privilege, how you do it. Because it's not easy. It just isn't. With so many use cases, like there are some tools, there are some just-in-time sort of access tools, there are even some whole sort of startups that are focused on that problem. But, you have how many apps that all use the cloud in very different ways, versus, to your point, how many humans. I believe that the app connection is way bigger, but versus, how many humans to support those apps. And they come and go, and they have different skill sets, and they have different requirements on how they do that support, right? It's a complicated problem. And so I found it interesting that last week there was just so much focus around identities and keeping them tight and how you do this.
Yeah, it's I don't think people really understand. Well, I know they don't really get it yet, but they're going to, because they're going to have to. Otherwise it's going to be big trouble.
Yeah, I do believe identities are the single biggest challenge. And obviously the rights connected to them, but we can talk about we've got a pretty good handle on networks and open and closed ports, even the network
Yeah.
ACLs. This document kind of mentions that, and we've got a pretty good handle on that. The CSPM did a relatively good job there, but the CSPM did a really poor job because it wasn't really the mission statement at the time around identities, right? They just
Well, and also to be fair, posture, right? I mean, identities need. It doesn't do me any good to know I have 865,000 longstanding privileges. I mean, I guess it helps to know, but I don't even know if you're getting that kind of information.
Right.
I think that I saw a graphic the other day that just really shows how complex and stratified cloud and cloud related security has become, with the big bubble being identity. And on one side, you've got the posture, and I can't remember, it was a Gartner slide. You may have seen it before, but
You're right. Much like the DSPM, right? The sort of data security side of things. It's an expanded view of what a CSPM could tell you about data stores. Because we needed more. There's going to be a wave. There already is of identity products that do the same thing. Like, what's the posture management of my identities? How many of them are scary? How many of them are pretty benign? How many of them have been used recently? How many are attached to resources and not people? CSPMs don't really tell me that. They tell me, to your point, you have 1,000 identities. Well, great, but my needs are a little bit more than that for sure.
yeah, and to be full disclosure, we do know of a few cool companies that are doing some really interesting things in the identity space.
Yes.
But hey, I think we have a guest that's
right.
waiting for us. So let's go find out who's on the program this week. All right, Patrick. Wow. Well, I'm so excited about our next guest.
No, me too.
Let's just say that I did have the chance to work with him for a while at Checkpoint. He was a vice president, uber technical guy. Let's go let him in, bring him onto the program.
Hello.
Hey, Neatsun, how are you, my friend? It's good to see
Great.
you.
Same here. How are you doing?
Terrific. Hey, so you're live, we're recording, and so welcome, Neatsun Ziv. Am I saying that correctly?
You nailed it.
Or is it Ziv? I want to make sure I say it right.
So yeah, I actually respond to both. So in Israel, it's part of the army culture. They called you in your last name, so I get to respond to both of them.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for being on the program. My co-host, Patrick Pusher, is along with me, and I'm the Gilligan on the crew. He's the professor. So you guys, I suspect, will have a great conversation. Let me take a brief second, Neatsun, and introduce you more properly. So your career is, quite impressive. I'm not going to go into it. What I know you, of course, is your time at Checkpoint when we overlapped a little bit. I think your last role there was vice president of threat prevention and intelligence. You were there for well over a decade, looked like almost 12 years. And it seems like this has happened in the past in this industry where something happens and immediately there's, by some, a recognized opportunity for a solution that's currently not addressing the market. And I kind of sense you saw through the eye of that needle with supply chain, and now the co-founder and CEO of Ox Security. Super excited to hear about what you're doing, because I haven't had a chance to talk to you since you've left. So with all of that preamble, Neatsun, welcome to the program. Tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
Okay, so As you said, software supply chain became a big issue. I think that the first time that I had a personal experience with that was actually doing with the team the analysis of NotPetya. And that was the first time that I actually saw something. I said, wow, this is mind blowing in the sense that you're not attacking one company in order to attack that company. What you're doing is you're attacking one company in order to get to all of their customers. And so this is brilliant because the amount of effort that you need to take as an attacker, and in order just to penetrate one account, that's a huge effort. Now think about it. You want to get to 12,000 accounts. So that's huge effort times 12,000. Or you can find out who is supplying software to them, and it might be, let's say, accounting software. It doesn't need to be something super fancy in that sense that you need to be very, very well connected. And you get in, and that's it. Everything is wide open to you because you got in through a trusted source. And as we started seeing this becoming a pattern, we understood that this is something that right now is one of the top attack vectors out there for somebody that wants to do a big splash, big impact. And this is what we're seeing right now every week in the news, because we are relying on so much software. It's packaged software, it's open source software, it is software that you build, it is everything around us. So of course, that's the ultimate way to do a big impact. And yes,
Yeah.
when we saw that, we figured out that this is super hard for most people to handle. Not just doing AppSec, but thinking about you as a supplier of software, this is really a big issue. And especially when you see the ease of somebody going into an open source and simply pushing in a line of code saying, let's say, support Ukraine or whatever it is, you get to understand how easy it is for everybody simply saying, yeah, I'll get the updated version. And there it is, part of your product. You're part of the revolution.
Fascinating. You know, it really is extraordinary when you think about how really brilliant it is to plant that egg, that Easter egg, if you will, that bomb, whatever you want to call it, right, in that supply, because that's when my hair's down the most, right? I'm getting my update from my provider. I'm getting my current information. I mean, it's that trust chain that we've never really interrogated in the past. So talk a little bit about how you're going about securing, because to me, I think supply chain, holy moly, man, how do you climb through and check out all of my trusted partners? How exactly are you going about doing that?
Okay, so first of all, you need to understand that it's not just checking your suppliers. So what we started by doing is actually mapping everything that is out there. So let's imagine that there are 300 software supply chain attacks that were documented to date. Now, you take all of those accounts, you research them, you understand what are the components, what are the TTPs, and you break them down to their smaller components. What were the techniques actually being used by the bad guys? Now, a software supply chain attack is not a one attack. It's actually a combination of attacks, one after another. So you do reconnaissance, you develop the resource, you find initial access, you execute, you get to higher privileges. It's a process. It's not a one thing that you do and that's it. You're done. So for us, the most important thing is, first of all, to understand where do you start your journey. And imagine a map of all the steps that somebody needs to take, that this map accumulates all the knowledge in the industry. So when we started our journey, what we've done is we actually took part in a group of companies that said, okay, let's map everything in the industry. And it might be companies like Microsoft and GitLab and Intel and a few other companies that what we worked with them is actually with their expert to understand what are the software supply chain out there. So we created a website called pbom.dev, pipeline bill of material.dev, and a GitHub repository that is completely open source that maps everything that we know of in the industry. And this is where we start our journey. So now that you've got a map of everything in the industry, you can actually start by saying, okay, now let's look if the most important thing is actually trust by my vendors, or is my CI/CD simply open to the internet with password 123 as the password? And you would say to yourself, nah, that's probably not going to happen, but it does. And some of the famous attacks actually started just like that. So you don't need to go to the most fancy of things in order to start your security journey. It's a very, very wide attack surface. And you need to understand, first of all, where do you want to emphasize and focus your resources? And this is step number one in understanding the journey. Now, for each of them, I think some of them, we've got great vendors out there doing great job. In some of them, I don't think that the solutions from the industry is sufficient or even providing enough insights to understand what should I do. Now, if I'm zooming out for a second, the challenge for the protectors in this side is actually saying, okay, so if I need to protect my software supply chain, I need 7 vendors somehow to control it, get it back to the developers, orchestrate the thing. And now that I see all the issues, I'm actually accountable to fixing them versus the previous situation where I didn't even see them. So I could say, you know what? I hadn't seen those.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. I didn't know.
Ignorance is
Yeah,
bliss.
it-
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. That's
So this is the journey that we're trying to fix.
so the first step, obviously, you describe mapping everything so you're understanding essentially how it's all coming together, right? How this journey, how the water flows from the mountain to the ocean, essentially, right? And are you then, from a security perspective, I mean, there's a lot of points, it seems, where there needs to be some check or interrogation or validation. I mean, so what's that process look like? Okay, so now you have it mapped. What next?
Okay. So the fundamentals of every software supply chain is basically relying on the 4 same principles. You've got a place where coders code, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and many more.
Right.
And this is where you want to understand if somebody can get in, what can they do? What are the changes that they can actually address in that sense? Then you're going to actually, what are they actually writing? Is it secure? What are the dependencies? What are the licenses that are being used out there? How is my infrastructure as a code operating over there? So you want to understand that everything that they write is actually secure by definition. So they are not pushing code that is vulnerable into production. There is one catch over there, that things age. So software age. So let's say that when you release something, it was perfect. But now somebody found a vulnerability, and on a yearly basis, I think that there are around 20,000 different vulnerabilities being published. So you develop your software, you've got hundreds of dependencies, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of dependencies, and something constantly ages and you get new vulnerabilities into things that were perfect when you shipped them. Now, this is being built using the CI/CD. This is step number 2. So you go to the CI/CD, the CI/CD takes your code, compresses it, places it, does some tricks with it, and then you've got an artifact. This is being stored in artifact registry. This is point number 3. And then it is being shipped into the cloud or into production. So those are the 4 stages that I would probably say 99% of companies are doing those 4 steps. So you need to think about each one of those steps as what's the best way to secure them, to make sure that nobody can access them, to change the code and actually control the entire ecosystem, and then make sure that every artifact you've got running in production did not age, that you know its origin, nobody tampered with it, and you know what it is. In most customers that we actually doing this exercise with them, they find a lot of things in production that they have no idea who's the owner, why they're there, what's their origin, and should they even kill them? And this is a very, very common case.
Yeah, that's extraordinary, right? And I imagine that's especially true in very large organizations, right? That there can be this kind of discovery, and then they're apprehensive about killing it because they think they may be affecting the business somewhere and they just don't understand it, right? I've seen that instance before.
So I'll probably say that we've got customers that are Fortune customers, and we've got startups around D and E as part of our portfolio. And I must say that, that it's not just something that is in old enterprises that have this problem. Think about it that a startup that is alive for 5 years, people already change, environment change, programming languages change, technology changed. And then you've got something in production that is an alien technology. Nobody knows about how does it work. It just works. So even in small startups, you see the same thing. It's
Wow,
everywhere.
yeah. That's yeah, it's a good point because there's oftentimes that's a tumultuous time. It's very rare that you have a
Sure.
startup that starts and there's not a fair amount of turnover and change and pivot and shift and uh,
And
new
of course, they
tools.
document everything wonderfully, don't they? Right? Of
Oh,
course.
yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I can see, like you say, the size of the organization can contribute to the chaos, but so can the stage, right? And so I think that makes a lot of sense where startups experience this maybe disproportionately to the number of enterprises that, it's easy to see in an enterprise. There's so many business units and they don't talk to each other that well. And security is kind of a unified approach. And so you kind of see where the breakdown happens in startups. I guess if you've worked enough of them, you see there too, but it's a very different way. I wanted to talk to you about a presentation I saw you give earlier this year. And you talked about this concept called, and I think it more like in an app set kind of world, a pyramid of pain. And in it, you
About,
made
sorry,
this
I
very,
couldn't hear the last
uh,
sentence.
a pyramid of pain.
Oh, yeah.
It, right? And in it, you said that 95% of organizations struggle so much that they don't get past the point of weeding through the signal to noise ratio of a lot of the tools they use. And I was curious just to ask you why you think that is. I mean, that's a phenomenon I've battled with, not necessarily so much in AppSec, although maybe these days a little bit more, but more from a general cloud security perspective. And it's very true that the number of observations these tool sets make are overwhelming, right? And they're not taking context into some of them now. The most modern ones are, but many of them aren't helping you, right, with this long list of even thousands of critical alerts, right? When you can look at them, they clearly aren't all critical, right? So how do we, in any realm, but especially kind of in your realm of supply chain AppSec, how do we deal with that? How do we make sense of that? How do we get
Okay.
trust back in the alert stack? Because for me, it's kind of gone.
First of all, I completely agree. It's one of the things that are completely broken in the industry. I think that there are a lot of incumbent vendors that started their journey as finding issues in open source. And they're doing great in taking standard libraries in the industry and simply presenting a lot of issues. And I think some of them are present right now in the market, and we're seeing the huge churn from those companies. Even companies that were born in 2015, 2016, you see that their value is diminished, meaning the entire journey of just displaying more and more alerts it is simply overwhelming. Nobody treats it with respect. And the biggest issue is you're trying to get this notion of list to a developer. Now, think about a developer. They are getting content from product managers saying you need to deliver this because the business something, something, something. Now, security comes to them and say, here's a list of 200 issues that we want you to fix. Now, inherently, there's going to be a problem saying, what should I do? Should I fix this or should I fix this? So you'll go to the first manager in the pyramid that is the guy that controls the AppSec and the developers. And this guy has no idea about the details. And I'm saying as one that was this point that things turned into. And you got a list, and you by yourself, you don't have the mental energy to go over 200 items and do the triage yourself because you've got your own job to do. And as you do this job, you get to the conclusion saying, you know what, pick the top 10, just go fix those 10. Let's see how much time does it take. Let's just have some kind of understanding. So you set a meeting a week afterwards, and the developers come back, and I'm talking about developers that I really admire for their skills. And it's saying, out of the 10, we're going to fix 0. I say, okay, that's not what I expected. And why 0? Said, okay. So the 3 ones on top, those are actually a test project that we've done for a candidate. So this is actually not being pushed to the cloud. So I have no idea why your stupid something vendor decided that he should present these findings to me, because they're definitely not being shipped to the cloud. Now, you see this? This is actually an older version. I have no idea why they're actually alerting on older branches. It is already deprecated. And this, you see this? This has no API to the internet. It is only internal. And this, it has no exploit. And so you see the list, and you said we picked the top 10, and I have no idea what to say. So you go back to the AppSec guys and said, you know what, guys, please take this list and do a triage and figure out what's real, so we can go back to the developers with a few examples of the real things.
Yes.
So the AppSec guys are saying, wow, we have no idea how things are actually connected in production, so we don't know what's going to be out there. So they're asking the developer guys, can you spare an hour to explain to me what they're going to say? I said, no, that's not my system. We need to talk with that guy over there. So you're setting a meeting with this guy, say, no, that's that guy. And you spend your time just trying to figure out what to do, and nothing gets done. This is currently the state in the industry, the way I experience it, and I think a lot of our customers are experiencing. So what we're trying to change is saying, look, the triage itself is something that you can easily understand. It's a set of questions. It's true that you need to understand the context and learn the context, but once you learn it, using technology similar to LLMs, you can actually ask the right questions, saying, okay, is it connected to the internet? And is this API actually externally exposed? And is it driving to the code? And who's the right developer to actually fix it? And who touched it? Because not always the last person that touched it, this module, is the right guy to fix it. And actually answer a lot of those questions. So when you come back to the developer saying, you know what, out of the 10,000 list issue, let's focus on those 3. And the reason I'm telling you to focus on this is, first, this has a live exploit. You can actually see the link here. It's a GitHub repository with an exploit code. There are indications that this is actually being used in the wild. Here's the ESP. Then you can see this is reachable in our case. These are the instances that are running in production that have this code. And this is the API gateway that gets the code to here. And the code that gets to here is actually connected through this path. And you actually see a lot of traffic going through that program. So once we get to the point that you're actually able to prove this sentence and say, you know what, this is actually touching this database that contains a lot of data that is quite sensitive. So I can't say for 100% sure that we've got all the facts right, but it's so close that it is not worth taking the risk anymore. And then you get cooperation.
So I'm just.
I mean,
Go ahead, Pat. Go ahead, Patrick.
well, I mean, it sounds familiar to the, I guess what I consider the CSPM kind of version 2, right? The first cloud security posture managers were really pretty dumb in that they looked at all of the resources, judged them independently. You know, my favorite one is the famous AWS default security group, right? Every CSPM used to flag that as the highest security, get out of bed problem, but it's something you can't turn off. They're there. And if some people use them, I mean, that's definitely not a best practice, but it's also not something worth, pager duty waking up infrastructure security folks in the night for most of the time, right? Now, in the second generation of CSPM, they're sort of looking at these findings. They're maybe graph visualizing them. They're looking at the context around them to say, okay, yeah, we have 1,000 high severity alerts, but which ones are internet facing and more than a public IP check, right? Which ones, in the case of malware, for example, which ones are remotely exploitable, which ones aren't. So they're starting to take some of that context into their algorithmic score for some of these observations. But I hear you in that AI could potentially help you go even further, right? With taking in even more signals, maybe not having to deal with that complex sort of algorithmic, figuring out which ones have the most weight, which ones don't on your own, right? So I think I was going to ask you, what role does sort of AI have in your product approach in the future? But you sort of already answered it. But that's what I think about is, can we get even more signals to teach us, to classify those alerts? Because, going from 1,000 high severity alerts to using context to having 20 can also be a little bit unsettling to people. I used to have this big alert stack, and now I've got, do I really only have 5 or 10 things that are truly important? Or are those just the things I should work on first if I have the time? What does that alert grading scale actually really mean? To your point, we've kind of lost trust in it, right?
So I think that one of the things that I really didn't like as a user is the fact that somebody says, this is a medium. Okay.
Medium. Isn't that a great classification? What the hell is medium?
What does it mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
medium, is it going to kill me? Yes or no? Please just explain to me in simple terms.
Yeah.
Right.
So what we decided is, first of all, I think that there are other ways to classify the industry from yes to no. But in order for people to gain trust, you need to provide evidence. And the way that we saw that we are gaining trust with people is by simply telling them, look, we think that it might look like a high without context, but we think this is actually not really important. It's a hygiene issue. So instead of saying yes or no, saying exposed to a kill chain or hygiene. Now, hygiene by itself is something that you should definitely fix. But if you can combine a few hygiene issues across the OSCA framework from discovery or the reconnaissance stage to impact, then it becomes a real issue. So this is, I think, where things become interesting. So instead of looking on one thing by itself, saying, what can I do with the combination I can see here? It's just like Lego bricks. Can I combine them together to do something super interesting?
Nice.
And I think that as you're able to provide evidence saying, this is connected to here, and this is doing this, and this is doing that, you can gain a lot of trust saying, I think this is really worth your time. And I think it's a big, big issue in driving the actual collaboration. It's a huge issue. And I think it's about that.
This kind of statistic, to me, just it kind of is right in the same area of really AWS alone has 12,800 API connections with 13,800 permissions to access cloud data and services. AWS alone. So if you use just 10%, you're in the billions in terms of probability. And certainly not all of them are exposed to something catastrophic, but that to me seems like it's kind of the crux of the problem, in the industry overall, is there's just too much that we have organizations that kind of look at that first layer and go, whoop, here's what's wrong, without knowing how it plugs into the second and third and fourth layers, right? Because that's what matters. And I mean, I don't know. I just think that wouldn't it be nice if we could just shake the Etch-a-Sketch and start over? Have nice clean hygiene from ground one.
Once you learn all the lessons, yeah, no kidding, eh?
So I think that, look on other industries. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second and look what happened in XDR. I think that's a great analogy. We had antiviruses, where antivirus generation number 1 was able to find issues. Number 2, they were smarter. They found patterns, behaviors, and things like that. And once we got to the point that we understood that there is an attack path. It's not something that pops up on your endpoint one day, says, hello, I'm here as a malware. There's a journey. You downloaded something, you executed something, you've done a journey, you got a mail, something happened before that.
Yep.
And it's not in context that first you can triage a lot of the false positives. Then you can understand, okay, what have I done wrong? Maybe I should have done more training. Maybe I should have blocked it. Maybe I should have done this and that. And I think that as the industry evolved, and we've seen a few different companies leading the way in understanding deeper than the standard things, companies like Mandiant, companies like CrowdStrike, and other great companies, when they were able to create this motion of saying, let's understand the why together. And I'm going to promise you that with us, you're going to understand the why and how you're going to be better next time. I think that as they took those methodologies of incident response and blue team and red team and incorporated them into the process and the culture, they found ways to do things way better. Now, if it would have been a static world, then it's game over. The good guys win. The challenge is that the bad guys, they've got incentive to do bad things to other companies that are worth millions of dollars in a week's work. So you're always going to find the right person with the right motivation at the right time to take advantage of that. So the world is not static. It's a progress on both ends constantly. And this is the world that we are currently amidst.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, and I wonder too, when I see in that same presentation I was looking at yours, which is very good, I see you use that Gartner stat that talks about, over half of engineering leaders are directly responsible for application security. Do we have the right people making the right decisions for, the security posture of an application? Or does engineering take their best attempt, send it over security, and then that bounce back and forth that you talked about? Right? How do we get out of that bounce back and forth? Is part of your mandate for your product sort of education on the developer side as well?
So let me zoom out for a second in order to answer this question. As somebody that led a healthy size organization of developers, you've got your own goals. You want to deliver things before a conference, a meeting, quarter end, whatever it is.
Sure.
When you've got bugs coming in, unnecessary security, bugs that delay your product, meaning it's something that delays your program, it delays your promises to your managers, to your ecosystem, to your peers, and so on. So you're trying to do things better, faster, and so on. I think security is completely not on or attached to that wave of doing things better. It is today mostly about showing you more alerts. And if we are combining those two and asking whether R&D manager has the incentive to actually go and check for security without somebody enforcing it or checking it or something external, I'd probably say that most cases the answer is simply no. They will do the bare minimum because the more they invest in it, the more they're going to fix. So it's a problem that is inherent in the way that you need somebody with so much discipline to do that. Because if somebody is so disciplined in that, they will also fix UI issues. They will also fix usability issues. They will fix performance issues. And there are so many different kinds of issues that you should address. And missing functionality. So there is never enough resources to do everything that you have. And if you've got the resources, you don't have the managers, you don't have the skills, you don't have something will come into play. So just for R&D managers by themselves to say, you know what, we'll secure it and we'll be fine. I'm not sure that I've seen a lot of good examples just because it's a profession. Somebody needs to understand the details and the meaning and constantly be updated and read the news about every new article that comes in. So personally, I don't think that it's a great idea without taking somebody that this is their skill set. It might be outsourced, it might be homegrown, it really depends on the scale of the company. But just security engineering, I'm not sure it's the best idea out there. Now, what's the best way to show it? And we used to work with somebody that did a lot of pen tests in Checkpoint. And when he showed to me the first time a project that we are going to release using pen test, that he was able to do amazing things to something that I thought my best developers did. That was an amazing experience to understand how much you do not understand about the advantage in security attacking. And I think that the answer is simply it needs to be split to a different accountability.
Do you credit that to the fact that it's just so the disciplines are really that disparate, that different, the way of thinking and how to look for and really make sure your code's secure? I mean, is that why you think it's somebody that's just got to be separate?
I'll take it to an extreme. Okay, so security is different from coding. In coding, you've got different languages. You've got front end and you've got back end. Now, you'll try to convince a front end guy to do back end job or back end to do front end, and it is very clear to R&D managers that these are two different kinds of animals. And now you're saying, okay, let's try and make sure that they also do security. And you understand that's not an animal. That is something completely different. It's not an animal. It's a tree.
Right.
That's like comparing apples to squirrels. It's not on the same scale.
So if we take it back to Ox on how you're addressing that and how your solution is addressing that, overcoming that, solving that challenge, because it sounds like there's this huge chasm that you're filling. Talk a little bit about how you're doing that.
Okay, so if there are 3 points that I want you to understand from the issues that we talked about before, is going to an adventure that you don't know the landscape is probably, not necessarily the smartest of idea. So number one, get a map of the landscape. Number two, if you want to be secure and not surprised, you need to make sure that you're covering the entire journey. So it's not just about the developers or the production, or it needs to be the entire journey from code to cloud. And without doing this entire journey, that's really an issue. And for each one of them, you need to understand in depth what are the threats, what are the exposures, and how to actually combat them. And the third one is simply providing evidence. Don't assume that the people that you're talking with know less than you. Because sometimes there are a lot of people that simply say, you know what, maybe I do not know, but I do want to know, so I'll be able to explain. And if you're treating them in a way that says, this is just medium and take it as is, trust me, I'm an expert, it doesn't create trust.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
you need to combine those three concepts together. And this is what we're doing in Ox, saying, how can we make this easy for people to actually understand the journey? How do I provide the evidence that what I'm saying is true, and allowing them to actually go step by step over my decision, say, you know what, I accept this, I don't accept this, this is a case where I see things in a different way, and allow them to actually say, you know what, in my organization, this is right and this is wrong. And if you're allowing them to do this entire journey in a single place, from code to cloud, with a journey map to saying, this is what we're going to do over the coming months. This is the end result that you're going to get. Those are the KPIs that you'll be able to measure our progress in actually developer satisfaction and ability to fix issues, in the ability to see the time of exposure from the moment that you detect it until the moment it is actually being remediated, not just
Right.
ticket closed, but actually remediated in production. I think it makes a big difference for people saying, this makes my life easier. Now I can control things, where before I just got the alerts, I had the visibility, but I had to do all of the rest myself.
Right.
And this is part of the journey, helping people that we were in their shoes do this journey and understand how to do it.
Yeah,
It's
I think I don't mean to interrupt you, Neatsun, but I really think that you've hit the nail on the head with step one and the map, right? And really understanding that entire journey, I think, is brilliant, because I think so much within this industry is kind of just a scoop of the ice cream, right? Not we're just kind of we're taking little chunks and then we're making alerts, but we really don't understand the entire map, as you put it. And I think that that's brilliant. And now, are you a SaaS? Are there on-premise components? What's the architecture that you offer your customers?
So we've got different kind of customers. I'd probably say that most of the tech industry really like things as a SaaS, and this is the easiest for us. As we're working more with the Fortune companies, everything for them is on-prem or on cloud. So for us, we are a Kubernetes native shop, meaning we can be run everywhere. We don't really mind. We've got a lot of customers that use us really in really impressive environment that are not connected to the internet. And we've got customers saying, you know what, everything is GitHub, everything is easy. Just add security, make sure that developers are productive, and do it fast, please. I want to in and out from this project within the same day.
You've got some pretty impressive customers on your website right out. I mean, when I look at, Intel, Microsoft, Upstream, Fox, that's, you guys obviously are doing pretty well. That's terrific. Patrick?
Yes. Meaning, we were fortunate to find a lot of people along the way that found our journey very interesting and their existing problem very painful. And they said, you know what, this is something that we want to be part of. We think that the current vendors are not, they don't understand us. They're really focused about growing fast, but their customer support are simply not listening to us. They don't understand what we're trying to explain to them, and they've missed the mark. And they gave us a shot, and we're very fortunate to be able to help those customers and learn from their experience as well. And it's been super interesting to see so many experts share their knowledge with us.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I could really see how your experience and expertise in this actual process of building software, right? As this world has evolved now and everybody's building software, it seems, right? Powerful opportunity for Ox and for you. And I really am excited to see what you guys do in the future, Neatsun. It's really cool to see you doing so well.
Well, in the coming weeks, we're going to release a new movie showing what's coming up. So stay tuned. It's going to be out there in a few weeks.
Hey, cool. Well, let us know, and maybe we can post it along with the posting of this podcast when we send it out. That'd be terrific. And hey, the other thing we do have that I'd love to invite Ox is we have something called Startup Stand Up. And it's essentially, we give you 15 minutes. You can do anything you want to do, demo the product, whatever, and then we publish it with one of our episodes. So we'd love to have Ox Security on and feature them. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
It could be you, it could be anybody you want it to be, however you'd like to do it. So
I'll be happy to show the Oscar map of the cybersecurity landscape in software supply chain, and a few tips of an open sources that we can recommend everybody to simply start using it by themselves very easily. And if somebody needs to do it more than in the scale of one project, we'll be happy to help them in larger scales.
Brilliant.
Amazing.
That's awesome. Patrick, anything else you want to pick at Neatsun before we let him go? He's been gracious with his time today, so thank you so much.
That was it. Please come back for Startup Stand Up. Where can people go that like what they heard in this episode? Where can they go to find more information? What's the best way to do that? To engage with you? So
the best way is simply go to ox.security. That's our website. I'm on LinkedIn, Neatsun, Neatsun. It's very easy to find. I'm the only one that spells its name neat like cool, and sun, the thing that lights the sky. So it's very easy to find.
That's right.
Yeah,
awesome.
Brilliant. And I can speak from experience. He's a neat guy and definitely a bright one like the sun. So, Neatsun, thank you very much. I mean that. It was great having you. I always enjoy listening to your soft-spoken but really insightful words. So, thanks so very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Grant.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on this episode where we talked with Neatsun Ziv. Sorry, I said that, messed it up at the end here. Ox Security. Check them out. They're really doing some outstanding stuff in the world of supply chain security. And so thank you all very much for joining us. And definitely come back and we'll see you again on the next episode. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Cheers.